Welcome to Faith, Love, and Therapy, a podcast to encourage and inspire. I'm your host, Jamie Johnson, a therapist working in the field of mental health for the last 10 plus years. I'm so grateful that you're here for another episode as we dive deep into mental health. And I'm excited about today because I have a guest that works in a field that I tend to shy away from. And so when you know that there's an area that you shy away from, you call on people that are more seasoned, that love the area, that are passionate about it. And so I want to be able to talk to her about our youth, our particularly our teens today, and navigating their mental health. And so today I have Khia Glover, and I am so glad that she's here today. And I want you to hear a bit about what she does and who she is. Miss Khia.
Hi, so my name is Khia. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I have been in therapy. I can't count the years no more, but I've been doing it for a while, mostly focusing on children and teens. And then I started Notes by Khia, which was, it sounds weird saying it out loud, like as past tense, because this transition is just now happening. But I kind of was trying to focus on a whole lot of things.
Mhm.
And then kind of was like, I know that children and teens are really where my heart is, but you got to reach the parents in
Yes.
order to reach the kids. And so, really just advocating for them, providing coaching to help parents learn different ways to interact with their child, different ways to think about their behaviors and their actions, and understanding them in a different way so that you can interact with them in a more positive way. We get the why can't you just, why are you always, and we forget we were there
Yes.
once upon a time and we thought and did those same things. So that's all that I want to do, is just help families have a more stable unit where
Yeah.
there is more love, positivity, and it's not like such a drain, but it actually can be enjoyable, and you can just tweak a couple things and you will understand them a bit better.
Absolutely. And I love that because I think that's part of the reason why I shied away from it. Is because I feel like sometimes parents have brought their children to therapy, and it was, it's such it's a family issue when you're
Correct.
working with children, and sometimes that's difficult if that's not your passion and your area of expertise. So just talking a little bit to you about what are you seeing in regards to some of the issues that our teens, preteens are struggling with emotionally and mentally or within the family dynamic.
Yeah, a lot of depression and anxiety. There are other things as well. ADHD. I know a lot more girls are now being diagnosed with ADHD because we're learning that their symptoms are different than boys, whereas boys tend to be more of the hyperactive part.
Mhm.
Girls, a lot of times it might be forgetting things. Sometimes you see hyperactivity in there as well. And there's a difference between ADD and ADHD, of
Right.
course. Um, but a lot of times with girls, it looks different. And so
Mhm.
we're starting to see a little bit more of that. But definitely the depression and anxiety are really high right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think across the board, those two kind of just hit everyone, but definitely more
Yeah.
so. We are seeing the increase in our young people, in our teens and our preteens. And what are your thoughts? Are there kind of some theories or what you're feeling or seeing as some of the precipitating causes? What are you noticing that's kind of coming up a lot as possible reasons why this is on the increase?
Um, a lot has changed. And as we open up about mental health, everybody is talking about it. Um, I think we're more aware. Like before, we didn't really have the answers. Why do I feel this way? What is this? Particularly in minority families where it's not as accepted yet. We're getting there. Um, but particularly in those family units, not having the knowledge and then all of a sudden gaining the knowledge, I think is one part of it, which
Mhm.
can be a gift and a curse, right? Because you don't know, in social media, it's snippets. it is not the whole thing.
Right.
So they're getting this, and people are saying, "Oh, yeah, I have depression. My symptoms are this, 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 this. Oh, I feel that too," but not knowing that there are so many other factors in that. But I think they're becoming more aware of how they're feeling and being more expressive
Yeah.
about their feelings and not feeling like they have to just tuck it away and hide it. They're
Mhm.
like, no, this is how I feel. A lot of our young people were highly affected by the pandemic.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's when we really saw a super, super surge. In those teen years, that connection with peers is extremely important. So ripping that away from them, which obviously I know that that was like circumstantial, but taking them away from that in such a sudden way, like they were in school.
Mhm.
They were, I think ours in Oklahoma were around spring break.
Mhm.
And so it was like you're getting ready to end a semester, and all of a sudden things are completely different.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. I had a lot of students that I worked with when I was working in the schools that they were frustrated with not being able to talk to their friends. And then when they come back to school, they have to wear a mask all day, they have to be separated. They're really not getting to talk that much and reconnect. That's not really being incorporated into the coming back
Yeah.
because we really didn't know how to do that. Um, so I think that's part of it too. And kids are wanting to be heard much
Yeah.
more often, and parents are not really feeling that.
Mhm.
So that becomes a conflict to where it's like if I can't express myself, then I'm kind of going the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of part of it too. There's a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're right. I think the pandemic in and of itself brings a lot to the discussion, and adults their own anxiety during the pandemic, along with how to talk to your teens about what's happening, and not necessarily in the habit of giving them the space to have such freedom with conversation sometimes, and then they're all in one place. Whereas they could go to school and have that outlet. And even when you speak to like developmentally, what is needed for that particular age group, I don't think, and not in a negative way, but parents aren't always considering that,
Right.
because it's kind of the day to day. And so we're not considering that this is a developmental process, that socialization is vital to their
Right.
processing. And so we're kind of seeing we're seeing the results of that period of time where they didn't have it, and returning back to social settings and trying to re-engage, but also I what you say about wanting to be heard too. I think it's interesting. I feel like they're doing so much research on their own, right? They're like
Yeah,
they
they are.
are searching these mental health terms, they are going on podcasts, they are listening to YouTube, all the things. So they come into your office kind of knowledgeable,
Mhm.
to a certain extent. And even the language, like you said, of like how they're describing what they feel and wanting to be heard is so much richer than previous years where,
Yeah.
sometimes you really had to pull young people like, okay, let's try to get this out. And, I've seen some, like I said, I don't see many, but I'm seeing some come in with like, this is what's going on. And it's like, oh, okay. Okay. You have some insight. Um, so when you are focusing on this particular age group, the preteens and teens, talk to me a little bit about kind of emphasis on treatment. What does that look like? Is it going to look like the typical sessions with adults? Are there some variations that you make sure that you incorporate? What may be different for a teen?
Yeah, it really kind of depends on where they are developmentally, their personality. I have some that still are, want to play games, even if they don't want to. Sometimes I just make them anyway because it's like you're still a kid.
Yes.
So let's enjoy that and, get back to that with your friends. You got to act all cool and act
Mm,
like this stuff isn't fun. But here, it's
right.
a safe space. You can do that.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a good time. So sometimes I incorporate games. I have like some question cards that I incorporate at times. And then sometimes we just sit down and talk, just like I do with the adults.
Yeah.
Um, and I give them homework, just like I do with adults. Even my little biddies, I'm like, okay, this is what we're working on for this week. And they're like, okay. And then, still checking in with them and everything like that. So it sometimes depends on their personality. And I try to meet them where they are. But yeah, those are a couple different variations that I try to add in.
Absolutely. And I think, we have been trained in that way, hopefully all of us, but, meeting the client where they are is something that we learn very early. And
Right. Yeah.
is that is definitely necessary. And I love the idea of play. I love the idea of play for adults, but I definitely love the idea of being able to incorporate activities that will allow them to relax a little bit and feel comfortable being their age. Because I
Yeah.
think that's another part of it, is that our teens are so much more um, I feel like they're so much more adult than maybe we were when we were growing up, like what they're thinking about, what they're experiencing, what they're exposed to. And so to have that safe space that you're creating so that they can be their age, they can
Yeah.
express and experience the joy of being young, and and process the difficulties of being young. So
Right.
um, helping parents. Okay. So we're parents and caregivers. I don't just want to say parents because sometimes there's the
Right.
aunt
Yeah.
that's jumping in.
I try to make sure I get out of that too.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
it's more than just parents. Yeah.
Definitely more than parents, even, down to, caregivers and teachers and those that are working closely with teens and preteens. What would you say are a couple of things to make sure that, or signs and symptoms that something else may need to be done? They may need to seek additional support for the young person in their life.
Yeah. Um, One, talk to your children
Hmm.
and not talk at them, but listen to them
Yeah.
and ask them how they're feeling, for one. Start there.
Hmm.
Some other things may be not sleeping or sleeping too much, isolating. Um, Really, you're looking for major changes in behavior. Um, so, if before they were always on the phone with their friends and seemed to be texting a lot, going to football games, going to different outings, and you notice that kind of um, stop or taper off,
Hmm.
I would look into that. I would say, hey, what's going on? Um, and get them to try to open up to you, but maybe get into therapy. If you see major behavior changes like increased irritability, sometimes we don't recognize that that is definitely a part of depression and anxiety, even for adults, that is a major symptom. And so sometimes they're not just being snappy,
Yeah.
sometimes those symptoms include irritability. And
Mhm.
so that when they're trying to respond to you, it just kind of comes out like in a manner that you might feel is disrespectful. Um, but isolating, not talking to friends, under or overeating, um, increased irritability and frustration, noticing how their body might tense up in certain situations
Mhm.
or how they respond like with their facial expressions and things like that. Do you see them seeming to be more tearful or crying often?
Mhm.
um, and like we talked about, they're doing much more research, so you can ask them more questions and they're getting more comfortable with talking about the issues that are going on, whereas we were kind of like almost taught to not talk about it. So we were kind of made to suffer in silence. But they have, like we talked about, a whole lot more vocabulary and understanding of all these things to where it can be an open conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. They probably could bring a bit more to the table in regards to the dialogue than we possibly were in generations before us, definitely. You mentioned kind of their reaction and how they may be irritable or they may be snappy and responding in ways that adults may deem as disrespectful or inappropriate. And
Right.
so I think that's a very valid and important point because sometimes the emphasis is on discipline,
Mhm.
and the space for understanding has been limited by that. And so I often wonder, especially, we mentioned culture before, but just different cultures manage raising children or just having children in their care differently. And so the expectations are different. And so I wonder, how can parents, adults, teachers, counselors, youth pastors, whoever, how can they create space? What do you think that in regards to creating space and developing a relationship where young people can talk to them? What are some of the things that they may need to consider if they're wanting to be a safe space?
Yeah. One is they know when you're faking.
Mm,
They will know that immediately. They are very good readers of authenticity
yeah.
and being genuine. So, first, start there with your motives. What are you doing this for? Because they're going to read through all of that.
Hmm.
Um, Two is being willing to listen sometimes and not inflict what you think, what you feel all the time, but listen to where they are. I love talking to young people. They have such interesting ways of thinking of things, and it's not always right. But if you take the time to listen to, okay, what was your process of getting there?
Yeah.
Instead of, well, why would you do that? And how does that make sense? Okay, what was your thought process? Tell me a little bit more about that. And not that you have to always be a therapist around them, but just being open to understanding the way that their mind works will help you so much more on the other end, especially when it comes to discipline, because you kind of know what angles they think about things and how you can approach them to where you don't have to be hard all the time. And that's where kind of gentle and mindful parenting comes in. Um, Also, don't punish them for what they tell you. Uh,
Mm,
I know a lot of kids are scared that, oh, my mom's going to be mad or she's going to take my phone. She's going to say I can't go with my friends. And so they don't want to be honest because they're looking at consequences.
yeah.
So when they're expressing themselves about the way that they feel, they shouldn't be punished for that because a lot of it they really can't help.
Right.
Um, and also listen to the message, not just the way that it's coming out, but what are they trying to express to you? When they're saying, Mom, you're not listening.
Mhm.
Yes, it might have come off disrespectful and I'm raising my voice, but what am I saying? I'm saying I don't feel heard by you. And that will make anybody start to get more anxious and irritable. And then all communication is cut off. So you sometimes have to be the one to say, okay, I see that you're getting frustrated. I hear that you're not feeling heard by me. What I'm going to pause and
Mhm.
let you express yourself and listen to the words, not just the way that they're coming out. And if you don't understand, just like we encourage them to ask questions, you ask questions too. Like,
Yeah.
okay, but not with a judgmental tone. And I think a lot of times that's what they're scared of too, is that
Mhm.
they're going to be judged for their thoughts and feelings. And they're in a super sensitive point in life. Like they care a lot about what other people think about them. And I think also the last thing, remembering what it was like for you at that age. And
Mhm.
sometimes that can be hard.
Mhm.
I asked for that, oddly enough. When I was a child, everybody be like, would say, I'm never treating my kids like this. I would
Mm.
never do this to them. I will never make them feel that way. And I would say that out loud.
Mhm.
And they'd be like, well, you just wait. It's going to be different when you become an adult. So I started praying, Lord, please don't let me forget how this feels. And it's been kind of a gift and a curse
Yeah.
because I don't forget how it felt.
Right.
Not that I remember every single situation, but I do remember those things. And so it's been great because it helps me to advocate and connect to them in a different way. And I also have to deal with my own things. But remembering what it was like at that age, telling kids, like, oh, you don't need to worry about those friends, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, friends are actually a very, very important part of
Yes.
this time developmentally. They
Yeah.
care a lot about what their friends think, and that is natural. All of them are doing that.
Mhm.
It's not just your child. So telling them, don't worry about what your friends think, well, that's kind of impossible because
Right.
their brain is naturally doing it, and that's what they're supposed to do at this time.
Yeah.
Um, so I know that was kind of a lot, but
That, that-
yeah.
Perfect. It's perfect because it also, points to a couple of things, points a lot of things, but how you are receiving the information that they're giving you allows them to feel that this is a genuine connection and wanting to trust you, wanting to trust you with what they have to share. I also hear sometimes we as adults have a way of minimizing their needs because we don't think that it's important,
Mhm.
because we are in the mindset that we're in that we're beyond that phase. Many of us, we're beyond that phase. And so it's like, we know, friends come and go. It's not that
Yeah,
serious, you know.
exactly.
And so we have a habit of kind of minimizing along with telling them that they shouldn't be so worried. They shouldn't be so upset because they don't even have the real pressures now. They don't have
Yeah.
anything, your life ain't that serious yet. You haven't,
Yeah,
and I hear that and I'm like, I understand where it's coming from because we have the responsibilities that they may not have.
right,
But I think it gets so twisted in how it's delivered that you just teach a child you don't matter.
right,
What you
exactly.
feel, what you think does not matter. And so I think as adults, we have to really take that in and pause because we are projecting what is important to us on, young people and they haven't got there yet, you know,
Right.
and we're trying to rush them along and kind of say, don't worry about that. Just come over.
Yeah.
We
And
have,
a lot of that sometimes is trauma, and we don't recognize it because even in adulthood, friendships are important, connections are important, and we saw that majorly in the pandemic. And so sometimes we're hurt by what our friends have done, we're hurt by how those things have gone. Um, Maybe you don't feel very connected to other people, so that's what you teach. But you have to remember that one, your philosophies don't have to be theirs, your opinions of things. Neither one of my parents, my dad's very outgoing and has a lot of associates and a few like close friends, so we saw him socialize a little bit more.
Mhm.
My mom is very much a hermit and does not like, I did not see her really hang out with friends. She never said, "Okay, y'all, I'm going on a girls' night," ever.
Mm,
Um, like we heard in our adult lives, she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to movies with my friend," and we're all like, "You're doing what?"
right.
So to them, friendships are not as important. So then that gets taught to us. But
Mhm.
it's like, no, actually, you may just be a different person. We have different personalities, we have different beliefs and feelings, and that's okay.
Yes.
It is okay. Like my brother, he doesn't meet a stranger ever, anywhere he goes. Like he's just naturally, people are naturally drawn to him. He is naturally outgoing. And that was something that my parents kinda didn't understand because he was so friendly and wanted to be around people and all of that stuff. It's like, no, that's natural. You should be teaching him how to grow that in
Yeah.
the right way, um, and not just, "Oh, no, you shouldn't even be worried about that." But
Yeah.
he is. He's outgoing. All of these things about his personality are gonna help him in his future. So your job is not to crush those things or pull those things away, but to build them up to show them how they can use it in the future for, like, their job or different things like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's such a it's how we're helping to shape young people um,
Exactly.
into the people that they're destined to be, and I think there's part of it, there's, like you said, that's who they are. There are things within our DNA that are going to be what they're going to be. And but sometimes as the adults in the life in their lives, we tend to say and do things that can try to not intentionally, I'm not going to say it's intentional, but can disrupt that, can disrupt that. And I think it's not just about their emotional state, their mental state, it's their spiritual life. It's their whole person is being shifted by how you respond to who they are. And I'm hoping that those of us that have the blessing and the opportunity to work with young people in any capacity, that we can glean something from this rather than trying to, I think we're often trying to mold in a way that mimics adulthood,
Yes.
and it's not supporting the developmental process that they need.
Correct. Yeah.
So
Even
go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, with their decisions, we want them to make decisions like us,
Yes.
but we were only able to one, we've made several mistakes. We will continue to do that. We will always be human.
Yes.
And we're so quick to go to punish, but it's like, who's punishing us for our mistakes?
Yeah.
Ourselves.
Mhm.
um, and so if you take a look at, I make mistakes too.
Mhm.
Sometimes I don't think things clearly. Sometimes I am also impulsive, but we like to act like we don't do those things and that doesn't exist and all of those things that make us feel better. But you're punishing the same things that you still, as an adult, have some struggles with. So that's why I say discipline, which is guidance. Let's talk through that decision. Now, some things, obviously, it's like, come on, like we've
Yeah.
talked about this several times, but then I think there may be something underlying. So maybe you give them someone else to talk through these things with. My
Mhm.
conversations with adults outside of my parents were always different.
Yeah.
And sometimes that was a good thing, sometimes not so much, but um as far as, I wanted to be able to talk to mine more often.
Mhm.
Um and so remembering these are some of the things that you still struggle with. And
Yeah.
so if you guide them on how to make decisions, what questions should you ask before you make a decision or decide on something? And that will help guide them and teach them how to do better in the future rather than just, I'm punishing you for each mistake that you make. You're going to be punishing forever. You spend more time punishing than
Forever.
you do connecting and like building relationship and teaching skills that will help them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, because it's the skills that they need. These are
Right.
that's the part that they need from us are the skills. And I think the point you made a little while ago about trauma definitely connects to that, is that we're so busy reacting because we don't want them to go down a certain path. We don't want them, to behave a certain way. We don't want we don't want to seem as though we failed. We don't want to feel as though we failed. So we react. And so
Exactly.
we don't give them the skills that they need. We teach them the trauma that we have,
Yes.
and they begin living from that space. Why are you so anxious? Well, do you remember how anxious you've been with me?
Right.
how, how reactive you've been with me?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
because and it's not a blame game, but it's awareness and understanding. This is instead of the skills that they need, you're giving the trauma that you've had.
Right.
um, and so how could we as a community, what would some of your, and you've given plenty, but I just want to give space for any other advice that you feel like, if I had the ear of every adult that currently is in the life raising or mentoring, pastoring, any of those areas, in any area in a healthy way, preteens and teens, what do you want them to remember? What do you want them to understand as they're being blessed to be in their lives?
Right. A couple things. One, listening again. It's
Yes.
like I cannot say that enough. Listen to them, hear them, attempt to understand them. And then the other thing would be um just lost it. You said, can you ask your question again and maybe
Sure.
that'll
What
will
what advice would you give those who are parenting or supporting, caring for, even leadership pastors, that have the opportunity to work with youth? What nuggets would you leave with them so that they are able to help this particular or this particular age group to work through their stuff?
Okay. So listening obviously is going to be number one.
Mhm.
Hearing them, working to understand them and where they're coming from. The other is remembering that all the same emotions that you have,
Yeah.
They have them too. Those don't just develop at 18. Stressors don't just develop at 18. They may be different, but all these emotions and stuff that you feel, sadness, fear, disappointment, anger, you have to allow space for them to also feel those things rather than trying to punish them or constrict them in their emotions. And when you understand that part and you can read through, um, you will be able to connect with them in a different way. So by taking the time to say, wow, I can understand how that was a hard decision to whether to follow your friends or do what we might expect you to do. I can understand how that might have been hard.
Yeah.
What are some ways that you can think about that next time or process those thoughts so that you can maybe make a better decision? I can understand that you're sad that you don't get to go with your friends to the football game today. You're disappointed. I understand that. And being able to also expand. I think a lot of times we think we're supposed to just tell them no, and that's it. That's how I was definitely raised, was like, my answer is my answer.
That's it.
Don't ask no questions. But it's like in their mind, they are trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So then a lot of times what happens is in their attempts to understand why something is that way, they're reflecting it on themselves because they don't have anything else.
Mhm.
Why is my mom always telling me no? It may be because she's tight on funds and she just doesn't know how she's going to be able to pay for you to be able to do this.
Yeah.
But for me as a teen, I'm like, she is always telling me no. And they are self centered. That's where they are in the developmental process.
Yes.
They're supposed to be.
Mhm.
Um, and so instead, they're like, well, my mom doesn't like me, and they're
Mm.
taking on all of these things that they didn't have to if we would just talk to them on an age appropriate level of like, hey, money's a little tight, so I'm not going to be able to pay for you to do that or whatever. Just be honest. They love
Yeah,
honesty. um
they do.
and just, saying that, and they're like, "Oh, okay." Or
Mhm.
they may have another solution like, "Oh, well, my friend said they will pay for me to get in." Now we go into ourselves.
Yes.
You don't want to have to let other people do for you. No, other people doing for you is actually a good thing, and you should express gratitude. And
Mhm.
not that you take advantage of it or whatever, but sometimes we need each other. That's called community.
Yes.
So just approaching it from different ways, being a little bit more open. I always say be mindful, which is thinking beyond the current moment.
Yeah.
So how might my response to this certain event
Mhm.
or interaction affect them in the future? So
Absolutely.
we're answering questions now because they're building knowledge. So we get to adulthood and we're like, okay, now I know my mama did this, but I really don't know why. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna just do it. And it's like
Yeah.
that might not actually work for you as an individual.
Right.
Um,
That's right.
so listening, understanding, remembering that they have all the same emotions that you do. And that is from teeny tiny all the way up.
Yeah.
So even your toddlers, they have all the same emotions.
Mhm.
And we tend to be more understanding of toddlers
Yes.
because it's like, oh, they're little, whatever. And then that all goes away the further they get into the teens. And it's like, no, they still have those same feelings. They are still working on the same things, emotional regulation,
Yes.
learning how to communicate,
Mhm.
learning the language, how to determine when I'm stressed, when I'm disappointed, when I'm sad, when I'm angry, when this is fear. They are learning all of those things and they're feeling it in different ways that they never did before. The problems of a 5-year-old are not the same problems of a 15-year-old, but the emotions are still the same. They're just learning how to weed through them.
Absolutely.
Um, they won't always know how to tell you exactly what they feel or what's going on in their head.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to help them. But in order to do that, you have to also pause and take a step back to hear what they're saying and process that kind of for them and help guide that thought process or those emotions that they're feeling.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's a couple things.
Great, great. Because I think we could, pause, listen, understand, and remember.
Mhm.
If they could, we know that that's not everything that they could, but those are major keys: pause, listen, understand, remember. And I think that'll allow us to approach teens and preteens differently. It'll allow us to hear them differently. If we're also, because I'm also hearing you say there's some things that it's going to tap into us as adults. And so we
Yeah,
have to be doing the work for ourselves as well, so that we
absolutely.
can pause, listen, understand, and remember. And I love that. I'm probably gonna, I'll tag you.
I know, right? Like if you see that on my page too,
Yes.
I'm gonna give you credit, okay?
We're gonna share that. Yes, but tell the people, because I think, and I would love to have you on again. We'll talk about that later. But tell the listeners what's going on with you, where they could find you if they would like to join your community. Just give them that information.
Yeah, so right now, noseblockhiya.com is still open. It's a little bit more tapered. um, and so um, I'm working on getting back to taking coaching clients, but for right now, getting ready to start the podcast back.
Good.
And I changed the name.
Okay.
So I'm excited about that. From Notes by Kaya, the podcast, to Kids Are People Too. And so that's coming soon. But you can listen to all the past episodes by looking for Kids Are People Too or Notes by Kaya. It's all there.
Okay.
And on Instagram, I am now at Monsters and Magic, and that's monsters without the O, and magic with a K. So MNSTERSNMAGIK. A lot of the information is still on Notes by Kaya on Instagram. It's still there. So you can catch up on all the different things as I go through my transition. Um, and then on Facebook, I have the group Parents Raising Mentally Healthy Children. You can join that group, talk amongst other parents, get some advice and different things as well there.
Awesome. Awesome. And listeners, remember that I'll pin that information in the description box so that you all can click and link and connect with her. But I'm so grateful for an opportunity to talk with you, Ms. Khia, and that you are really, really diving in and working with a generation that sometimes we see, but we don't see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know that they're there. We're trying to engage them in ways, but going deeper in a season that they really need us to go deeper with them is
Right.
important. So please connect with Khia, y'all, and follow her on all the platforms so that we can be better in supporting our young people and supporting her as well, as she does work that some of us do not want to.
That's fine. I love them. I love working with them.
So we're so grateful. Thank you all for listening and joining me for another episode of Faith, Love, and Therapy, where I am focused on mental health and spiritual well-being. And we have met Miss Khia Glover, and it has been a pleasure. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.